Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to all of you to our debate on Europe's digital sovereignty. Today's debate is hosted by our steering committee member, MEP Angelika Niebler. Angelika is an MEP with the EPP group. She is a member of the European Parliament Committee on Industry, Energy and Research, as well as of the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality, among many other things. And today we're joined by several experts to discuss the concept of European digital sovereignty and better understand what it actually means and how it can become a reality. So a warm welcome to our speakers, and I'll have to brush up my German today. I'm afraid Ulrich Wilhelm, Director General at the Bayerischer Rundfunk, the Bavarian Broadcasting. Ulrich represents German public broadcasters in the executive board of the European Broadcasting Union, and he's also a member of the board of trustees of Acatech, the German National Academy of Science and Engineering. A warm welcome, Ulrich. We're also joined by Gianpiero Lotito, founder and CEO of FacilityLive, the Italian digital scale-up that has been defined the European search platform. And Gianpiero is also the president of the European Tech Alliance. Benvenuto, Gianpiero. We're also joined by Wolfgang Kopf, senior vice president, Group Public and Regulatory Affairs at Deutsche Telekom, where he is responsible for regulatory and public affairs, competition, media policy, and spectrum strategy. Warm welcome. And last but not least, we're joined by Bueltmann, Managing Director at HERE Germany, who is in charge of directing HERE's external affairs and of corporate responsibility functions. Welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, after listening to our speakers, there will be an exchange of views with the audience, which will take place in the Q&A session, but we will guide you there later. So we're now ready to start, and Angelika, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. So, dear Maria, dear panelists, dear colleagues from the European Parliament, I know that Ivan Stefanovic is with us this afternoon. Dear ladies and gentlemen, from wherever you are connected to this session, I also would like to, first of all, warmly welcome you to this exciting topic which we are discussing today on behalf of the European Internet Foundation. So it's great that you are joining us today. I hope that everyone is healthy and in good spirit, even though we do not yet know the outcome of the US election. So we are still waiting for that. Let me come to the topic of today's conference, Europe's digital sovereignty, or better, Europe's strive for digital sovereignty. The fact that we are all right now connected via StreamYard, which is a US service, I think perfectly well introduces into the topic of today. Of course, there are also other video conference tools available. You all know them, you all use them, I think, nearly every day, be it WebEx, be it Microsoft Teams, be it to-go meeting, be it Zoom, Google Meet, Skype, or whatever you're going to use. All of them have one thing in common, that is that they are all US services. No service is offered by a European company. And well, that is something which we have to question. Maybe we have to be concerned about it. The trend as regards the video conferencing system is actually not the only trend. The trend is much more general. The European Union, is lagging behind if you look at the digital world, and the same is true with regard to China. That China is also rapidly catching up and much better off compared to the European Union. Looking at our global competitors, we have to realize that we are talking about global tech companies, which right now collect, store, process, analyze all our data available. I think it's a little bit comparable to the US election system, where the winner takes it all principle is applied in all the states right now when counting the votes. And actually, we have to consider that development quite serious, because the consequence is obvious. We are in Europe heavily dependent on global techs outside Europe. And that has been even more true if you look at the pandemic times in which we are right now. We really learned every day, every minute how dependent we are. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear panelists, that's the question of today. What is the solution? Yeah, what to do? This question is one of the most discussed topics in the European Parliament now for months, actually. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion and our panel, the answer of our panelists today. For starting the discussion, maybe I'd like to reflect 5 points which are very important for my own assessment on how to find a solution, on how to deal with the topic. Firstly, digital sovereignty does not mean advocating for isolation or protectionism. This is definitely not our European approach. The aspiration is a different one. We want Europe to be a player, not only the playing field. Secondly, we in Europe, you all know that very well, we care about data protection. Data protection is key for the European Union. Look at the health sector, patients' data or personalized data falling under the regime of the GDPR, of which we are really proud of. And I think that any regulation, any policy on platforms need to be streamlined with our GDPR regime. For industrial data, of course, that might be a different story. Thirdly, competition law does not help us to arrange for a fair level playing field in the market. I think we need ex-ante regulation for dominant market players in order to prevent data leaches. How to do this? I think that's really the most interesting question of today. And let me stress, I think it's really not an easy question. We had a lot of discussions already in Parliament, and we are still trying to find out what's the right approach. But I truly believe if we in the European Union are elaborating on a good solution, that can also be a sort of role model for the rest of the world. Fourthly, Europe is not only about industry, about market, about technology. Europe has always been about values as well. Increasingly, the idea of a European digital public sphere has emerged. And I'm more than happy that my dear friend from study times, Ulrich Wilhelm, is with us today, because actually I'm sure he will present his ideas on that approach in more detail. I'm looking forward to that. Fifthly and finally, it will be vital for the European competitiveness to launch bold European digital projects. Blueprints for groundbreaking projects are already in development. I'm thinking, for example, about the European data strategy and the European cloud infrastructure, spearheaded by the project Gaia X. I know another good friend of mine, Wolfgang Kopf, who is going to speak later on. Deutsche Telekom, where you are in charge of, Wolfgang, you have been the promoter and the launcher of the Gaia X project. I'm more than happy to learn more about what that project is behind, and how that is going to help us in order to get more digital sovereignty in the European Union. So with these opening remarks, dear ladies and gentlemen, I will leave it for now. I'm really, really looking forward to listening now to our other panelists, to listen to our speakers. And I'm also very, very excited about the Q&A round, which we are going to have later on. I am going to unmute myself now again. Really be happy to be with you this afternoon. And without further ado, I'm now giving back the floor to my dear colleague, Maria Rosa Gibellini. So thanks for listening so far.
Many thanks, Angelika, for setting the scene so well and introducing such an important topic. And as you said, I mean, there are a lot of questions about digital sovereignty, and what should we do is the essential question. And now I would like to introduce Ulrich Wilhelm and give him the floor. Ulrich with the Bayerischer Rundfunk and Acatech. And do you have any answers?
Well, dear Maria Rosa, dear Angelika, thank you very much for this kind invitation. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm also convinced that this debate is more than timely. As Angelika put it, the current corona crisis makes us aware on how dependent Europe has become on non-European platform operators, be that from the US or increasingly from China. Digital platforms are increasingly penetrating every area and aspect of our lives. And my core thesis is what started as digital services like search, a digital bookstore, cloud storage place, has become an essential utility. However, different from other utilities like schools, water supply, or streets, the dominant digital platforms are completely under private control, following commercial logic of the attention economy. In effect, Europe is losing its influence over the digital public sphere at a time when it has taken on a central role in the continent's economic and social life, as well as diminishing Europe's economic competitiveness and thus the prosperity of European society. This poses a serious threat to people's individual freedom and privacy, and to Europe's democratic values. Acatech, Germany's National Academy of Science and Engineering, has recently published an analysis on how to foster European digital autonomy by creating what we call a European public sphere. I have edited this study, put forward along with the former SAP CEO and chairman of our board of trustees at Acatech, Professor Henning Kagermann, whom you might know. The document has been put forward by a project group of various experts from business and science. Its focus and strategic target go far beyond the sector I represent, the media or the public service media. Let me make 3 points which are key for our perspective from the European Public Sphere project. Firstly, in view of the current balance of power in the digital sphere, it is not enough simply to regulate the market. Instead, it is necessary to recreate a functioning market from scratch. Second, alternative products are not enough. We need to think in terms of infrastructure. A better offer like websites, apps, things like that is not enough. After all, there have been several promising startups that were quickly swallowed up by the ecosystems of the major platforms. Instead, the goal should be to develop a digital ecosystem with the ambition of establishing an open infrastructure that enables further offers and platforms. Such a European infrastructure would be consistent with European values. By its very technical design, it would guarantee principles such as transparency, fairness, and the protection of private data against misuse. In order to provide an effective alternative to the quasi-monopoly of the major providers, this technology infrastructure should therefore be conceived as a public service. Third, the state, on EU as well as on national level, and in Germany also on the Länder level, needs to redefine its role. Government regulation needs to be complemented by a comprehensive overall digital strategy. Such a strategy needs to be characterized by modularity, interoperability, openness, and transparency. This enables continuous development and a diverse range of business models. Products and services should be developed on the basis of open source standards. Further, we need the establishment of a governance entity, such as a European digital agency or agency network, together with an alliance of European actors, including content, service, infrastructure component providers, civil society initiatives, and research institutions. Finally, we need government funding coupled with European regulation to kickstart the establishment of such an open European digital ecosystem for the development and operation of the key technological components and products for a digital public sphere. One point that Angelika also mentioned is really important to all of us, and we must avoid misunderstandings. It's not about creating an alternative secluded internet. This sphere that we talk about would be part of the internet. It would be open to everyone, both within Europe and beyond. The key to Europe's digital sovereignty lies not in isolationism, but in the creation of ambitious alternatives. So far for my impulse. Thanks again for this kind invitation, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion, and we can clarify more points. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ulrich, for introducing this interesting concept of European public sphere. I'm sure there will be an opportunity later to discuss more in detail. And I would like now to bring in the point of view of the European Scale-Up and of the European Tech Alliance with Gianpiero Lotito.
Good afternoon to all. The topic digital sovereignty is one of the most important in this moment. I remember in 2014, my first speech in Parliament was in AIF event, and I was speaking about the algorithmic society that could be a problem, could be something to study and to approach with different rules and behaviors. After 6 years, there is a fil rouge that arrives from the attention to the algorithmic society to the digital sovereignty. This is important because we need to understand also what is. So I try with 5 points as the MEP before to describe which are the needs that we have to build a digital industry in Europe. I look from the perspective of the technology and the company that works in the technology space. First of all, we need to develop a digital tech champion generation in Europe. That means 3 things: market champions, that means deep technologies, and that means hosted data in EU. 3 different blocks: hosted data in EU, deep technology, market champions. And we will see in these minutes that we have only one of these 3 blocks here, the market champions block. Second point, creating a procurement condition at all the PA level to support EU champions to grow and to have a better continental competitiveness on the first tier of innovation. US, Far East made this with their champions. It's a normal thing in this field, and also Europe with Airbus and Galileo project made the same in the past. So it's important because in this way we can have de facto standards in Europe, because without de facto standards, the industry cannot compete at the global level. Think when Europe had the GSM standard and we had champions like Nokia and Ericsson that were in telephony, global champions, not only European champions. The third point is rules. We need rules that respects EU tradition, EU culture, and EU way of life. And GDPR, of course, is the perfect example of this. The fourth point is develop talent attraction policies, because we need talent in this industry, and all the companies around the world has problems to attract talent, and a double problem that is to keep the talents. And the fifth and last point, clear and incentivized approach to capital. don't explain why capital is important to scale rapidly this kind of company. So we live now in a situation where we have in the US block trillion company valuation, trillion valuation like Apple, Microsoft, Google, etc. In Far East, we have hundreds billion company valuation like Alibaba, like Tencent or Samsung. In Europe, we have deca-billion company valuation like Booking, like Spotify. So there is an imbalance that need to be matched. We need to close the gap to have this kind of competitiveness, because we need a digital industry. Digitalization is the process who favorite the digitalization of all the other industries, the digital industry that need to have digital company in Europe, digital technology made in Europe, and we need also to host data in Europe. The three blocks that I told in the beginning. With this kind of recipe, we will have a European digital industry, and we will have a European possibility to compete at the global level in this kind of future. Thank you.
Many thanks, Gianpiero. Very clear messages. And now I would like to bring in Wolfgang Kopf with the Deutsche Telekom.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Gianpiero. I couldn't agree more. But I have to say, it's when you're in industry and try to do this, it's more difficult than describing the goal. But let me first go a step back. Angelika has said, what is digital sovereignty? And I think this term is not yet really clear when we discuss it. We have some French buzzwords, which is souveraineté numérique, which has some connotations of self-sufficiency. I think that's not the way we want to go. At the same time, I very much agree with Angelika. We should not go towards protectionism. But what we need, and there it's very, very difficult to really define this, and that's strategic autonomy, and we must, and that's for sure, reduce dependency on China, but also on the US. What do I mean? I think Gianpiero has given you some of the decisive goals already, how to reduce dependencies. If you look at the current policies in the two blocks I was mentioning, China and the US, there's a huge movement towards industrial policy measures in the US. China only works with state-led economy, of course. And this can be seen in the microchip industry, an industry where we thought, hey, that's a global supply chain. Nobody in Europe must care about supply of microchips, and we are all fine having them produced somewhere in Taiwan, Korea, or wherever, or even in China. I think the US have recognized that this is not the case anymore. And what we are observing is that US chip maker NVIDIA is taking over British ARM, which is a decisive company in that value chain, for 40 billion, and Xilinx is now taking over AMD for 30 billion. That gives you an idea what the movement in the US is now in this basic digital technology. In addition, the US government puts this year about $25 billion in the microchip industry. At the same time, we already heard the level the hyperscalers, the big cloud providers, have already reached. If you look at the combined market value of them, it's about 5 trillion. not billion, trillion, and their cash reserves are about 500 billion, so more or less the European Recovery Fund. That's what they just have in cash at hand. And that gives you an idea of the market power. And if you then look at the market shares in cloud services, which are the decisive basic services for any digitization, Europe now has about, European companies have about 5% market share in Europe. 95% is with the US companies. And this is the reason why we initiated, together with other German, French, and other European companies, the project of Gaia X. We think if that play goes on and on, Europe is playing no role at all in the end in modern digital services, and will be just a digital colony. And in order to make that happen, the idea of Gaia X is basically about standardization and rulemaking and cooperation in Europe when it comes to cloud services. Gaia X, if it's successful, can be the nucleus for European standardization, which is then the role model for an interoperable and transparent system of data storage, which we don't have anymore. We have very proprietary services. Once locked in, you can't change anymore. And that's the main problem, I think, when it comes to looking at these hyperscalers. I think building such a project is an important cornerstone, but it will be not sufficient. And there I come to what Ulrich Wilhelm has said. I think in the end, regulation, as foreseen now at the European level, will be crucial to safeguard the whole thing. What do I mean? I mean, we have a Digital Market Act, and there are some leakages, what might be planned and what might come. To me, I think the most crucial elements of such a market act are pretty simple. It's ensuring interoperability, ensuring access to data, and making sure that abusing market power is really limited by ex-ante regulation. It's something we also in my company thought about carefully, because we were always very skeptical when it came to regulation. And we thought it's fine if market forces really regulate the whole thing. But given the sheer size I just described, and the market power, and the very, very limited power of cartel authorities, DG Competition and the other cartel authorities in Europe, when it comes to abusive behavior, we think the Digital Market Act must implement regulation which ends this behavior. And this brings me also to another element. I think we also need a competition law reform, which also enables European companies to grow, because we have, at least in the current practice, so many limits in growing as European companies that we cannot compete anymore at the same scale and size with US companies. Last but not least, I think the current program, which was set up by the EU Commission, the post-COVID recovery money fund, which foresees large sums for basic funding of technology, is a very, very good starting point. And together with the Digital Market Act, if we start funding technologies like quantum computing, precision farming, brain-computer interfaces, or artificial intelligence applications. That's something which is a promising step forward, and we believe that can help Europe to gain momentum and to scale up with China and US. Thank you.
Many thanks, Wolfgang. We have really a lot of food for thoughts now. And last but not least, over to Michael Bueltmann with Here, Germany.
Yeah, hello everybody. First of all, thanks a lot for inviting us, for having us in this very important discussion about sovereignty. I mean, there have been so much things have been said, which of course would be great to discuss. But maybe I focus a bit on the perspective of view of an international company. And you may, in the first place, ask the question: why is it relevant for a company who is globally active to focus on questions like sovereignty? And Wolfgang was already to a certain extent alluding to it. And just to stress that point, it is really about reducing dependencies, and it is about resilience. Maybe to illustrate shortly for the ones who have no clue or who are not too close to what HERE is doing. So we have a legacy in more from the B2B side, working with location data. So location intelligence. So the roots are with building out digital maps. So if you're sitting in a car or having a mobile phone in hand, the likelihood is huge that the information behind, so the digital map, has been produced by us. So we are active in 200 countries around the world. We are quite active in the US with some 20 offices. We have a joint venture in China. And are kind of confronted regularly with industry policies. We see, of course, the way China has decided to go, and we see the market dominance and the market cap, which had been summarized in the US. So sovereignty is for us an issue clearly to see and to prevent that there are dependencies. And if we say dependencies, then of course access to a network and to cloud services is one thing. But one step further, for us, it's all about content. And it has been mentioned that the access to data, and I would even go a step further and say access to a certain system which is created by data. So these ecosystems with the known lock-in effects are of course crucial. And in the given context, where nobody can really foresee what decisions may come up motivated by some political decisions, it's crucial to have independencies and to go forward. And in addition, we see, of course, that our customers, for example, in Asia, but in Europe as well, they are very interested to see where data is handled and how we can really ensure that our service is permanently available and in outstanding and excellent quality. So this is the driver why we are kind of highly engaged in that discussion as a European company. When it comes to describing, maybe before listing few points, maybe it's easier to just describe it with one concrete approach what we undertook together with the German government, and by the way, orchestrated by Acatech, Ulrich. So they are quite active in that to set a data space up. In the first place, these data space for mobility is the first case which I'm aware about in Germany, which is a bit advanced already. So there is another data space about health data and preparation, but about mobility, the approach in short is the following. There will be the data space where mainly a catalog of metadata will be available, where all participants can, on a voluntary basis, contribute to. So it will be the public transport companies, it will be the OEMs, the railway companies, the aircraft carriers. Everybody who has something to do with mobility and geodata will contribute to, again, on voluntary basis. Make data available and see whether an existing business model can be improved, or, and this is very important for us, if new business models can be created based on these data which are made available. So that's the idea. we are quite advanced, as said, in these discussions, and should have a structure ready early next year, going live latest in October 21 in the context of the ITS World Congress in Hamburg. All with the clear aspiration not to have that limit as the siloed German approach, but to have that linked to the Gaia X initiative, to clearly think it in an European manner and not to focus only on one country approach. That would, from our point of view, would not make too much sense in that context. What we can contribute to is our experience of setting up a marketplace with all related content, like how to do it, how to set up a data fabric with these huge amounts of data, where you have so many different data sources which have relevance for others, and you need, of course, to clarify the related rights. And I listened to the comments making a differentiation between the personal data, which are falling under GDPR, and more the industrial data. And from our point of view, clearly in the discussion, we are a bit overlooking that Europe has a lot of strengths when it comes to the industry data. I'm not saying that personal data and maybe some search engines, that the market is kind of completely closed. There may be here and there some opportunities, but when it comes to the pure industry data, we see there are a lot of opportunities. Where I would be spontaneously a bit careful is when I was listening to the calls for regulation. This is something in our view where we need to clearly understand what we would like to achieve. And if this is clear, then I think it makes sense to consider and work on regulation. But we saw in the past lots of approach about platform regulation, competition, where we need to be very clear that if you have generally applying regulation in hand, you are, of course, kind of have all companies in Europe, smaller B2B platforms and digital players immediately under. And I think we saw examples where with a kind of too strict and not flexible regulation, you may even have the adverse effect and perpetuating an effect which nobody wants, and strengthening even the bigger players in the market without naming only few. And it's not so important whether they are coming more from the right or the left side of the planet. So all in all, I think it's not a plea against regulation, but we need to carefully look into and understand what we are doing there. And with that, back to you, Maria. Thanks a lot.